Shadow of the Erdtree was recently announced with gameplay and an official release date. Scheduled for June 21st, many people, including myself, are very excited for this massive expansion to release for an already massive game. It's also crossed an incredible 23 million copies being sold as of making this video, which if you compare From Software's other games like Dark Souls, Sekiro, and Bloodborne, Elden Ring has doubled the units sold, or more than doubled the units sold. It's very clear that From Software has landed on a gold mine with an incredible game. Also, the game has just now turned 2 years old as of February 25th. I began replaying Elden Ring again since the announcement sparked my urge to play it. And to tell you the truth, it's just as amazing as the first time I played it. I wanted to make a video on Elden Ring for the channel, so why not make a video talking about why Elden Ring was so successful and why that gameplay formula worked. I'll be doing just that in this video, breaking down everything that makes this game incredible and why you should play it in 2024 before the release of Shadow of the Erdtree. I'll have chapters for an easier viewing experience to specify each topic as I break down this video. There will be spoilers for some story content in the game, so be cautious of that if you haven't played Elden Ring all the way through. And if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to the channel for more Elden Ring and gaming content. The first thing that I would like to mention is the way that Elden Ring made a strong representation of what to expect. The way that Elden Ring just throws you right into the middle of what to expect right after creating your character, which is having to fight a grafted scion, which is an enemy that is difficult to fight even in the late game. But with this fight, you're supposed to lose. You can win if you're good enough to do so, but it is excruciatingly hard to do so. And it just results in the same, as it's a scripted death no matter what you do. After that, you go through the tutorial and you're faced with another difficult boss as soon as you step out into the massive open world. The Tree Sentinel is an enemy that is hard to deal with, but this time it's different. You can attempt to fight the Tree Sentinel, or you can sneak around him to complete other dungeons, caves, or camps to strengthen your character and improve your weapons. This is something that many people fell in love with about Elden Ring from the very beginning. There wasn't any handholding, you just had to interact with things or talk to people to realize where you needed to go. But even then, you get to choose what you want to do. You can head straight for Stormvale Castle, head straight to Caelid if you wanted, or just explore other places in Limgrave. The last option is the most recommended, as you need to level up your character to begin a certain build to help in your journey. That's the great thing about Elden Ring. You get to improve yourself and come back when you're ready, like going back to defeat the Tree Sentinel. That specific tone is set early, and the best thing about it is it's a learning experience too. The enemies could punish you severely if you're not careful. When I first played it, I really struggled with the enemy in the first camp with the shield and the huge spear. Dying over to him repeatedly was part of the learning experience for me. Now, obviously, if you're familiar with From Software video games, you know the gameplay can be brutal, so that's really no secret. So learning how your enemies attacks, what to expect, and how to take advantage of whatever you can is the way to overcome who or what you're fighting. This also helps get more familiar with the game mechanics too, and what I mean by that is that you need to pay attention to the actions you attempt to make, or you'll get punished even more. For example, if you're playing as a mage character and you try to cast a spell with no FP, your character triggers an animation that shows them trying to cast, but nothing happens. The animation takes a few seconds to go through, leaving you vulnerable to an attack. The same can happen if you're out of uses for your flasks and you try to use it anyway. So keeping an eye out on your stamina as you roll, your health, FP, and the amount of uses your flasks have are very important. And of course, preventing yourself from getting attacked. Everything in this game just hits really hard, even in late game. Some enemies can even attack and kill you in 1 to 2 hits. It's a way of keeping you on your toes and humbling you all the way through. These are just key examples of how Elden Ring really sets the tone of what to expect for the rest of the video game. Now, when it comes to combat, Elden Ring is truly on another level. The bosses are intense, there are so many weapons to choose from, and a ton of different armors as well. Although the armors don't really matter as much, but you get the point. With the combat, you can choose so many different playstyles, from using glintstone sorceries, incantations, crafting, and ashes of wars, each requiring their own specialties and skills in order to acquire higher level or better performing attacks. I mentioned already that the combat in Elden Ring is very punishing if you're not aware of what you're doing or just not paying paying attention in general. This keeps the players locked in normally at all times, unless you're just casually trying to farm for runes. But the combat is always pushing you to keep improving, because the game continues to get harder in scale as you, the player, continues to get better. This means you have to test out different spells, weapons, ashes of war, or anything else. With all of this though, you can acquire buffs for your characters. And what I mean by that is you can also acquire and activate the great runes from the demigods after you've defeated them, each with their own unique and special buffs. For example, Godrick's Great Runes enhances all attributes for the player, giving you an advantage as you fight. This is a great one to help the player continue as it increases health, FP, and stamina, plus many more attributes. I also have to add is something I really love about From Software games is how you can break poise to open an attack that leaves the enemy or even yourself stunned. If you deal enough damage, this will cause that. It gives you a breather as well as an additional attack towards your enemy. You can continue to do this throughout the battle too, so focusing on multiple successful hits and protecting yourself is usually a guaranteed way to win the fight. Some enemies will even receive more poise damage if you manage to hit them in the head. The next thing that I want to mention is co-op and PvP elements within Elden Ring. Although I believe both of these things could have been executed better, I still think they're pretty cool mechanics nonetheless. I do love being able to help friends or have them help me with a boss by summoning to your world or theirs. There's just something extra hilarious about watching your friend get destroyed or thrown about in an extremely violent way and knowing you're next. But if the host dies or the person being summoned dies, they're immediately sent back to their world and you have to do the whole process over again. I'd like to see a better improvement on this in the next game though, hopefully a more inclusive co-op mode. However, summoning a player to help opens the doors for invaders to enter your world. I actually think this is a good implementation as well, but sometimes the person invading can be laggy and it's hard to land hits like that. This can result in you hitting the target, but they can still roll around acting like you never hit them. It's just a frustrating experience all around. It doesn't happen all the time, but it still happens. Getting a little off track explaining the co-op, but the combat truly is amazing. Plus, Shadow the Erdtree will be adding 8 new weapon types. With this, the combat will have even more depth to it once that drops as well, and that's something I'm super excited about. The characters of Elden Ring is another thing to love about this game. The way that From Software wrote these characters was amazing. Blythe, Bach, Alexander, Ronnie, Melina, Rodrika, Iji, and so many more, man. There are even others that you love to hate as well, like Saluvis, Dung Eater, Sir Gideon, Ofnir, Fia, and more as well. And that's not including the demigods. The emotional attachment that you get from some of these characters, like Blythe's questline within Ronnie's questline. Honestly, you end up rooting for him because he's someone that helps you as you progress through the said Ronnie questline, but by the end, you have to end up killing him because of an obligation to help Ronnie from the Two Fingers. Everything happens in a way that makes him go mad, resulting in you having to kill him. There are so many endings for side characters that it really surprises you, mostly ending in their death, but they were all written very well. This is another reason why people loved Elden Ring. Becoming emotionally attached to characters applied more motivation to want to keep playing, to see how these characters' stories played out. Even the demigods had interesting writing, like what happened that caused the shattering and the explanations that made each demigod the way that they were. Now, I want to single out Radahn. However you look at the good or evil within Elden Ring, you have to admit, Radahn had a lot of terrible things happen to him. Without getting into too much detail, Radahn wanted to protect his land, Caelid, but was driven mad because of the scarlet rot caused by Malenia. This also resulted in Caelid to go into ruin and Radahn to go crazy. Through all of this madness, he still prevented a meteor from crashing into the lands between, and he also learned magic to be able to ride his favorite horse, which he was unable to do so because of his increased size. Yes, and that's the horse that he rides on to fight you with. The more you think about it, the more it gets the player thinking as well. Even the demigods have attachments, and there are always reasons for these characters to do what they do. Having greatly written characters is a must for any game. They help decide how much we, the players, interact with them and continue to do things for those characters. Moving on to one of the most important details in Elden Ring would be the art style. It is hard to put into words how amazing this game feels and looks, but the art style is executed so well. It makes you stop and look so many times. I think some great examples, in my opinion, are the two step-up moments that you have. The first one being at the beginning when you take your first steps outside in Limgrave. You're thrown into this beautiful open landscape with unique colors and style. The first time doing it was amazing, and it still is. The second step-up moment was when you think you've completed completed a good portion of Elden Ring and you defeat Godric the Grafted. You make your way to the end of Stormveil Castle, go outside, and there you go. The best view of the game in my opinion. You stand on this cliff face, looking at the view that overlooks Raya Lucaria and Liurnia of the Lakes and more. In the background you see this massive Erdtree in the distance, glowing. The colors, the mist, the water, everything just screams art in a beautiful and balanced way. Each area also has its own art style as well. Limgrave is more calming, a fitting tone since it's the starting area. Caelid resembling hell with its red colors and atmosphere. Fitting as well since the area is quite difficult and it's recommended to go there once you become stronger even though it borders Limgrave. Lindale in the capital plus the underground areas that have the stars and unique backgrounds. The enemies that reside in each of these areas are similar to the theme of where the player is, so everything fits together nicely. For example, when you fight enemies within a cave or the underground, they glow. They actually look like enemies that you'd fight in an area like that. Having a more set art style that truly shines out on its own is more appealing than a game that tries to force realistic graphics for the sake of doing so, in my opinion. Also, some of the boss fights have some of the best visual designs with their movesets. When a Crucible Knight goes into their second phase with their wings, when Melania activates her second phase and all the effects and particles shine on screen, and Renala's moon backdrop when you fight her. It truly makes these fights special and unique. Not to mention some of the spells you're able to get makes all of these mentioned things appear so cinematic if used together. It really is absolutely jaw-dropping at times. I also have to add that the map layout and design is incredible too. The way that they designed the entire map to look like a curled finger, everything was designed in a way with specific artistic view that really shines bright and brings everything together. And now the last topic, and the one that I wanted to save for last, since I think it's actually one of Elden Ring's strongest attributes. I'm sure a lot of people are confused by this, but I'm doubling down on it. Even though the story can be hard to understand at first, but the more you know, the more addicting the lore can become. It's rather simple when you begin. You're tarnished. Your goal is to defeat the demigods, collect the shards of the Elden Ring that were split apart caused by the shattering, recreate the Elden Ring, and become Elden Lord. Pretty tongue-in-cheek, but it has way more depth than that. Everything and everyone is trying to kill you because they somehow know you're tarnished. Every faction, every enemy sees you as the ultimate threat, and they know you're trying to take the journey to become Elden Lord. In doing so, you'll meet a lot of characters that will either help you or try to kill you. Depending on your choices and what you do shapes the way the game ends. The choices that matter can result in 6 different endings, some good, some bad. So choosing wisely is some more freedom that From Software gives the players. I guess depending on your stance of these endings, the good or bad endings can be subjective to how you interpret them. That's what makes this story so amazing. The amount of lore that is packed within Elden Ring is massive, just like the amount of content. And like I mentioned before, dissecting what made the demigods the way they were is really interesting, since their actions really shaped a lot of how the world is and the lands between. Tie in the Round Table Hold and the Two Fingers as well, George R.R. Martin really outdid himself when he put the entire world together. From my understanding, he wrote the history and the skeleton of the world, and From Software filled in the rest. Going back to how I said the story is pretty tongue-in-cheek, it's still true though. And what I mean is that not every story needs to be this huge elusive plot with plot twists or dialogue and cutscenes. A simple defeat the demigods, collect the shards of the Elden Ring, and become Elden Lord was perfect for the setting of Elden Ring. Obviously, there's more to it than that, but if you're explaining the story in basic terms, I feel like that's the best way to do it. Throw in decisions, killable NPCs, and different endings, you have a fun story for gamers to do whatever they want within. When you combine things like great combat, deep character building and creation, interesting stories and characters with a perfect art style, you get a masterpiece. Elden Ring is a game that From Software developed with heart and dedication. All of these reasons listed is the reason why it won Game of the Year in 2022, and the reason it sold 23 million copies. I think From Software's previous games walked so that Elden Ring could run. Creating this open world game in a new franchise with new lore was all possible because of these previous games. All these reasons are also why people aren't complaining about Shadow of the Erdtree costing $40. Everyone knows they're going to get their money's worth out of this expansion. The trust that people have for From Software is there and very noticeable. I, for one, am very excited to play Shadow of the Erdtree, and I wanted to make a video explaining why I am excited, plus what made Elden Ring so special, in my opinion. Anyway, I'd love to know everyone's thoughts about this video, so put them in the comments down below. Are you guys playing through Elden Ring again after the recent announcement, or did you even stop? Put that down below as well. I love interacting with everyone in my videos, and I'll be covering more Shadow of the Erdtree news as it becomes available. So be sure to subscribe to get those updates. If you haven't watched my previous review video on Helldivers 2, click here to watch it now. In the meantime, thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you guys in the next video.